Alright, we're back to work on Frankenstein again, so let's roll that intro and get into it. So, I was able to skip out of work a little bit early today, so that'll give me a bit more time to get to work on the Civic here. So basically what I want to do is get the brakes bled, and then I want to adjust the alignment. So hopefully I can make some adjustments today, maybe get it close to where it needs to be, so at least I can drive it on the street. As it is right now, there's no way I want to drive it on the highways. So let's take a quick look at it, and then we'll get to work. So basically what I want to do is match the camber on the back with the camber on the front. So I have a slight bit of camber on the front. This is kind of going to give me an idea. This is a very rough way to do this, but basically I have this straight board here, put it up against the front wheel, and then I have a level. And as you can see, there's a little bit of camber on the front. So if I pull it away to the point where it's level, there's about an inch gap or so on the top. So that'll, like I said, that's a very rough way to do it, but at least it'll get me close. It'll be nowhere near exact, but if we come to the rear and I put it up against there, look how out that is. So in order to get this level, it's way off in the other direction. So that's just about an inch on the bottom there. So it's basically the exact opposite of what I have on the front. I do need to adjust the toe in as well. It's just a little bit off on this side, and it's quite a bit more on the passenger side. So I also want to adjust the ride height in the back, because I've had it raised for quite a while now, and I used to like the way it looks, but I'm kind of starting to change my mind here. Like, I don't know, I think I'm just gonna lower it a little bit in the back so it's not raked so much. So first thing I'm gonna do is adjust the ride height, because that's going to affect the camber a little bit. I'm gonna take some measurements of the wheel gap in the back and kind of compare it to what it is in the front, and then I'll just make my calculations that way of how far I want to go. Once I got my measurement down, then I'm gonna jack up the car, take the wheels off, and then we can get started. Alright, I think I got the ride height dialed in on the rear of the car. It's looking really good, so let's have a closer look here. So if you remember, this is basically what we had on the other side. And now, that's what we got. So it's still just a little bit higher in the back than it is in the front, but maybe about a quarter inch or so difference. I think it looks much better than it did before. So I'm gonna do the same on the other side quickly, and then we'll get started on adjusting the camber. Alright, so got the car jacked up and the wheel off on the passenger side, and now I want to adjust the ride height. So basically on these coilovers, these are D2 coilovers. It's quite similar on most coilovers anyway, but you'll have two collars up here. So the small one here, if you loosen that off, it'll allow you to turn the big one. And by turning this one, you will adjust the preload on the spring. So I did adjust it slightly on the other side, just to kind of loosen it up a bit, because it was quite stiff in the back. So I just wanted to loosen it off a little bit. And then to adjust the ride height is the bottom collar here. So by loosening that off, it'll allow you to turn the entire assembly, and then it goes inside the tube on the bottom, and that's what adjusts your height. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to adjust the preload slightly, just like I did on the other side. I did about 2 turns, I think. Not a huge amount, but it's just a little bit. I just want to start fine-tuning the suspension on this thing. But first things first, I got to get the ride height set up. So I'm going to do that now, and I'll show you when I'm done. Alright, so here's how it looks after adjusting it. So as you can see, the gap in between here is a lot smaller than it was before, so I adjusted it by about 3/4 of an inch. On the other side, I had to do it about an inch, so there was about a 1/4 inch difference between the two. So I'm gonna put the wheel back on it and then measure the distance from the ground to the top of the fender, and it should be pretty close now. Alright, so I got the wheel on there, and without even lowering it to the ground, I can already tell that the gap on this side is still a lot bigger than on the driver's side. So my initial measurements might have been off by a little bit, and I think it's because instead of measuring from the ground to the top of the fender, I was kind of going by where the tread line is here to the top of the fender, and obviously that's going to be different on both sides, so that probably affected my measurements a little bit. So I'm going to take the wheel off again and adjust it by about another 1/4 inch, and then they should be pretty even. Okay, so the wheel is on and I lowered it to the ground. I think I got the ride height fairly even now. So basically I'm going to take my straight board here and do what I did before and just put it up against the tire, and then I'll use my level and I'll try and get it somewhat even with what the front is at. And I think if I remember right, it was about an inch difference. So when I get the wheel off and I get to the camber arm, I'm gonna have to tighten it about an inch or so. Alright, so with the wheel off the car, now we have access to the camber arm. So basically this is what we're dealing with here. There will be a nut on this side and a nut on the inside, which I'll have to loosen off. And then I basically just need to twist this whole arm here, and that'll bring the camber outwards or inwards. So I've never cracked this thing loose before, and I know it's fairly old, so I don't know how easy this is going to be. It could be seized up pretty good. So this might take some doing, but it has to be done. So let's get into it.
One eternity later.
Alright, well, this is basically what I've had to resort to just to get this thing adjusted. So the 2 nuts, they ended up loosening off right away, but then when I tried to adjust the middle part, it wouldn't move at all. So I removed it from the car, brought it over here, so it finally gave me an excuse to mount my vise to the workbench. So that's done. Once it was mounted, I was able to stick a thick screwdriver in this end, and I was able to get this side turning quite easily. So this one was actually not too bad, but this one was really bad, and I ended up having to take a 1 1/8 inch wrench, and it just kind of fit on the end here, and it would not budge. Like, it was chewing away at the metal here. So I ended up getting my air compressor with an air hammer on it and basically shot this a few times, and that was enough to loosen it up just a little bit. I could do like maybe an 1/8 of a turn on it and it would seize up again. So I started spraying it with WD-40, and then I would just start turning it back and forth until it would go a little farther, and I got it to the point now where I think it's pretty close to where I need it to be. It's going to be a trial and error thing, so I'm going to have to mount it on the car fully, drop it to the ground again, see where it's at. If it still needs to be adjusted more, lift it up again, remove it again, do the same process until I get it where it needs to be. So I've been messing around with this for well over an hour now, and this is where I'm at. So now I'm going to try test fitting it onto the car, and we'll see what happens. Alright, so lower to the ground now. I think I might have went a little too far, so I used my board and level technique on the front, and then I measured the back, and then I used a measuring tape to see how big a gap there was. It's about an 1/8 of an inch off or so. Like I said, it's going to be a lot of trial and error doing it this way, but it has to be done, so that's what I'll do next. Okay, I pretty much have the camber set up the way I want it. Now I'm going to have to adjust the toe in just a little bit. Now that I've adjusted the camber, it's not as crazy as it looked before, so I'm just going to get underneath the car and adjust the toe arms, which is basically the exact same concept as the camber arms, only they're brand new parts, so they will be a lot easier to adjust.
The next day.
Okay, it's the next morning now. I put in a pretty late night and I was getting pretty tired already once 1 o'clock rolled around in the morning. So I got the toe adjusted, I think, pretty good. I've been using the string method to kind of tell how straight the back wheel is. And here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So basically what I've done is I have a jack stand on the front and a jack stand on the back. And I got my front wheels centered. And then I just ran a string from the front jack stand to the back jack stand. And then that'll show me whether or not the back wheel is aligned with the front wheel or not. So, and looking at it from here, it is perfect. It is bang on. So I'm happy with this wheel. I haven't checked the passenger side yet, so I'm going to do that next. And if that one checks out, then I think I'm happy with the alignment as it is for now. So, alright, passenger side is good. So I think the last thing I gotta do is bleed the brakes. So now I'm gonna jack up the car, take the wheels off, do a quick brake bleed, and then we can take this thing out for a spin. Alright, I just took the Civic out for a good drive around town. Seemed to be handling okay, so brought it back to the garage here, just looked over everything. Everything still seemed okay, just the driver rear brake, looks like the parking brake is sticking, so I'm going to have to do some work on that, but when I came back then the brake was actually smoking because it was just grabbing so much, so got that loosened off, and then I took it out on the highway and it handled pretty good. It felt really good on the highway. I made it up to about 100 kilometers an hour, so I didn't want to push it too hard on the first time out. At least I know it can handle the highway. Just a couple more things I have to do. The rear, I guess, is now settled, so the ride height is a bit lower in the back again. So it's about even with the front, so I want to raise it a little bit more in the back yet, probably by about another 1/4 inch or so, and then it should be where I want it to be. And I'll just do a bit more work on that parking brake and that should get it working good. I'm just gonna lubricate it a bit and get it running smoothly. I know the cable is good because it was very smooth when I was installing the cable, so I think it's just the spring inside the brake that's actually causing the problem, so I'll do some work there yet. And then I think it's pretty much good to go. So yeah, if you like the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And we'll see you in the next one.